Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. Welcome to the webinar on increasing research impact, brought to you by EURAXESS Australia and New Zealand in collaboration with Taylor and Francis. Please allow me to introduce to you our esteemed guest speaker for today, Luke Antieul, who is the Director of Marketing for Researchers at Taylor and Francis. Luke has been with Taylor and Francis for 7 years, working in a number of roles that support researchers to find the right journal for their research and achieve their publishing goals. Most recently, Luke has worked specifically on full open access journals and worked to educate authors on the benefits of publishing under this model. Thank you very much, Luke, for joining us so early from UK. And I'm Nishant Sandilya, Regional Coordinator for EURAXESS Australia and New Zealand. For those who have joined our webinar for the first time, EURAXESS is an initiative of the European Commission that addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and seeks to enhance scientific collaboration between Europe and rest of the world. We provide free information about European research, career opportunities, international collaboration, and networking possibilities. Since all of you are watching this on your laptop or your phone, I'll encourage you to type EURAXESS Australia and New Zealand on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube and follow us there. I'd also like to encourage all of you to please use the Q&A function in the interface to ask any questions that you might have while our speaker is presenting. Once the presentation is done, we will come back to take your questions. Please note that the recordings and slide of the session will be provided to you. However, the recording will not include the Q&A, and hence I will recommend you to stay for the entire duration if you want our expert to address the common queries that applicants have. Perfect. Now, so let's begin. I'll now pass the presenter privilege to you, Luke, and you can begin your presentation.
Thank you very much, Nishant. Thank you for that kind welcome. Okay. Good morning, everyone. And yes, as Nishant said, it's very early in the morning here in the UK. I'm based just outside Oxford with Taylor and Francis. It's lovely to be with you all today. I think this is the first webinar I've done for the Australia and New Zealand region, so it's really, really good to speak to you all, and I hope we're going to have a good session this morning or this evening as it is for you. So as we've already said, the session today is all about increasing the visibility and impact of your research. We're going to take you through the webinar. I'll talk to you a little bit in a minute about what we're going to cover, but just wanted to say right at the very beginning that we're going to be doing some live polling on 2 occasions during the webinar using a tool called Mentimeter. Some of you may have used it before for other academic presentations. Instructions will follow near the time, but for now, all you need to be aware of is just that you'll need to be able to open another window on your browser or use a separate device if you've got one to hand. So just be aware of that, and in a few slides time, we'll kick off with that. So what we're going to cover today is really to obviously introduce myself and the webinars we have done, talk about why it matters for researchers to share their research, and then we'll go into a bit of a deeper dive of the channels and the tools that are available for authors to share their research. So lots of them will hopefully be familiar to you already, some of them may not be. But we'll do a deeper dive on 2 in particular, which is press releases and media campaigns, and also social media, as 2 areas where we tend to get lots of specific questions. We'll then finish off by looking at resources and the training that's available outside of this webinar for authors to use, before obviously taking any questions at the end as previously outlined. So to begin with, I always like to frame this as a massive opportunity and also a huge challenge as well. And that's because right now it's never been easier to create content. As a researcher who's just published a paper, there is a whole range of tools available at your fingertips to instantly promote the research that you've published. Many of those tools are cheap, they're quick to implement, and they allow you to reach huge communities of potential readers and other academics right in that moment. If you publish your research open access, which means it's freely accessible online, a major barrier to people reading your work has also been removed, as obviously that paper is there and available for them to read, which is again an even greater opportunity right now with that growth of OA research. However, there's a challenge as well. So we know that more research is being published than ever before, and we know that generally the internet and the online world is awash with engaging content. Research has shown that readers online have an average attention span of 8 seconds. So when you promote your article, you need to have a really, really clear hook to engage your audience quickly. And even once you've engaged them, there's no guarantee that readers are going to digest all of the research that you've done and all of the specific points and intricacies within your work. And of course, this comes against the backdrop that funders and institutions and research supporters are demanding more impact from the research that you are doing and the research that they're supporting. So lots of support is needed, and hopefully this is where we as publishers and other groups as well that you work with can really start to help you in this area. Okay, so I promised you some live polling, and what I'd like us to do just to begin the session today is to really think about the different groups of people you're trying to reach when you promote your research. So these can be as broad or as specific as you like, but the different groups that you're aiming for. So to do this, if you can navigate to minty.com, as I say, if you're using the Zoom desktop browser to watch the webinar today, just be careful not to leave the webinar as you do it. So open another window or pick up another device if you've got one. When you get to minty.com, which is MENTI, it will ask you to input a code, which is 27389964, and you can see that on the screen there, 27389964. And then you will then see the question on the screen there. So which groups are researchers trying to reach when you promote your research? And then you can then just start to add in some answers, as many answers as you like. It will let you do a word at a time, I think, or a short phrase at a time. And then I'm just going to come out of a presentation and I will show you the answers as they come up on the screen. And I think you should be able to see that. I'm just going to double check. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to double check. You can see that. I think you've lost it now. Hold on. Okay, you should have that back again now, and that looks like that's working. So these are all your answers coming up on the screen. I should say that all of these answers are completely anonymous. There's no such thing as a silly answer here. I can't see what you're saying. All I can see is the collection on the screen, as you can see. But we'll have a quick look over what we've got. So policymakers right in the middle there. The more people who say an answer, the bigger it becomes. So we can see that that's obviously, I think, the number one answer at the moment, alongside other researchers, other academics, so clear academic stakeholders. I'm trying to see, sometimes we get some sort of specific subject areas coming in there, but I can't see too many of those today. Governments, lots of people saying governments. I can see the general public in there. I can see industry, which is good. So obviously non-academic stakeholders, funding agencies, someone's mentioned already. Clinicians, yep, again, is another sort of big stakeholder group. Users, so that's quite a broad term as well, but I'm assuming there we're talking about sort of academic users, so potentially students and groups who might not be doing such advanced research themselves, but are still a good audience for your article. There are so many coming in here, I'm struggling to keep up with these. International organizations, yep, that's a really good one. Yep, I'm just seeing if there's anything else that we haven't already touched on. Teachers, yeah, I mean, I think you've got the media, fans. I like fans, whoever said that. We sometimes get people saying their mum and family, so yeah, that's very much, I think, in the same line as that one. Taxpayers, yeah, thought leaders, loads of really good answers here, and actually more variety here than I think I've ever seen before, so well done for all of these answers. Really good points being made. I'm just seeing if there's any other groups. I mean, I think you've exhausted all of the ones I can think of, so I'll be impressed if there are. But I think you've covered them here. So you can really see clustering around the middle of those academic stakeholders, so researchers, students, I think, are there fairly prominently as well, policymakers, government, media, industry, all the major groups you can think of. And hopefully what you would take from that then is that there's a lot of very different groups on that slide, with a lot of very different viewpoints as well. And actually tapping into all of those groups is remarkably difficult and requires quite a different range of tactics and channels to be used to do so. I am going to come out of that now. Anyone who's still adding an answer, they will come in. I'm just going to see the message in the chat. It is now 6:10 in the UK, so it is very early in the morning. But it is a pleasure to be with you all at this early hour. Okay, let me just get my presentation set back up. Cool. So those are the key groups who we're trying to reach, and in a minute we're going to talk about how you can reach those groups and what that looks like. But as I've already said, they are really, really distinct and different groups of people, and it's a real challenge to meet all of those audiences. It also varies a lot by different subject areas. So for some of you will have looked at some of those groups on that slide and thought, actually, my work probably isn't relevant to some of those people, and that's absolutely fine. And part of the challenge here for researchers is to really think about the groups you're trying to reach and why actually each group may or may not be important to you. So we'll move on to now to talk a little bit about why it matters. So why is this important? Why are we having this session today? I think a lot of these reasons will be well known to you already, but they're worth mentioning here anyway, just in case some of them are not. So obviously, as I think everyone on this call will know, as you publish your research, it is very, very important that that research is discovered and read by your peers. And by that, I really mean other researchers. So these are people who will build upon the meaningful breakthroughs you've made and advance the research in your subject area even further from that point. The more people who do that, the more people who read your research, who talk about your research, who cite your research and build upon it, as I've just said, that delivers value to both your institution, your research funder, and any other group who have supported your research. From a personal point of view, that obviously helps your own career development. It becomes easier to pitch for promotion and other progression if you have published a lot of research that's made an impact and that's been highly read and highly cited. It also helps justify the value of that research then to those people so that they will support more research in the study in this field in the future. And it also obviously supports the dissemination of research to non-academic stakeholders. So these are policymakers, general public, the people who wouldn't find your research if you didn't actually actively promote it. And then finally, from a publisher point of view and from a journal editor point of view as well, it can also really help to enable the development of specific journals within the field. So the more people who read research and cite research, that's better for the journal, and then obviously builds that journal as a real strength of publication for the community that you're working within. So I suspect that you know quite a lot about the academic stakeholders you have to reach. I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next couple of slides about the non-academic stakeholders, so particularly the general public, and how their attitude to science really looks. So one of the big pushes on researchers at the moment, as you've identified in that Minty poll, is cutting through to the general public and growing the real world impact of your research. But it's worth really thinking about the context that researchers are working within here. So how engaged are the general public currently? Do they want to know more about science? And when we think about the COVID crisis that we've all lived through for the last 18 months, questions like that are really, really crucial to understanding that the public are listening and understanding expert advice, and also trust it enough to take the instructions that they're given. So in 2018, Wellcome, who are obviously a major research funder, surveyed over 140,000 people in more than 140 countries around the world. So this was a really, really big study to find out all about their attitudes to science. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see that there are 5 statements, 5 percentage values, and on the right-hand side, you can see that there are 5 statements. There's no poll this time, so there's nothing to do on Mentimeter, but I just want you to have a go just in your head or on a piece of paper in front of you and matching up the percentages on the left to the statements on the right, using the letters and the numbers there for simplicity. So I'll give you about a minute to do that as I read through what we've got on the screen. So we've got A 70%, B 23%, C 62%, D 53%, and E 14%. And they match up to number 1, want to learn more about science. Number 2, have low levels of trust in scientists. Number 3, they feel that the work scientists do benefits people like them. Number 4, they say they did not learn about science in school. And number 5, a percentage of 15 to 29-year-olds who say they know some or a lot about science. I'll give you just a few more seconds to have a go at matching those. Okay, let's have a look at the answers. So this is how they match up. So 70% of people feel that the work scientists do benefits people like them. 23% say they did not learn about science in school. 62% say they want to learn more about science. 53% of 15 to 29-year-olds say they already know some or a lot about science. And 14% have low levels of trust in scientists. Now, of course, those are global figures, and therefore there's huge global variation in those answers. But for the purposes of this discussion, I think that 62% figure is really interesting. So these are members of the public who say they want to learn more about science, and they present a huge opportunity for authors and researchers who can cut through the noise and cut through to that group. And of course, that data was very global, but actually it's worth looking at some specific data from Australia, again, from the very same Wellcome report. I apologise to people from New Zealand who are on the call today, that obviously are focused a bit more on Australia here, but I think the numbers between the two countries are actually very, very similar, as you'd imagine. But you can see that 90% of people say they've learned about science in secondary school, so comfortably above that global average we saw on the last slide there. And actually in the younger age category of 15 to 29-year-olds, that figure is even higher at 100%. Only 33% of people have high trust of science, but 85% of people feel that science benefits people like them. So actually that insight seems really important. You can see that you've got a really educated population within Australia. They see the benefit that science and research brings to their lives. And actually, there's a real opportunity then to really reach that wider population and really show the positive impact that your research is having. Okay, so the next section of the presentation is going to really think about the how and how authors can promote their research and the tools available to do so. I'm just going to begin by giving you a quote here, which came from an author who published with us a few years ago now in the Journal of Educational Research. And this is Russell Warren from Utah Valley University in the United States. So he published an article and then he did lots and lots of work working both independently and with Taylor and Francis to promote his work once it had been published. He created a infographic and a video abstract to sit with his article on our website. He wrote about his article in a blog piece on the Education Week blog, which is relevant for this subject area. And he also sent out a press release for his article and promoted that on social media as well. His article has been downloaded over 2,000 times since all his promotion. He reached over 30,000 people on social media. And he provides us with the following quote about his experience, which I think is quite helpful to set some context here. He said that publicising an article is work, but it's worth it. I've received more emails about my article in the past 2 months than I have about all my other work in the previous year. Another university has invited me to visit because of my work, and my students are more excited about research because they see the attention it is getting. Not every article I write will be interesting to the public, but I will definitely be doing what I can to rustle up some interest in my work in the future. And I think that's hopefully some interesting context from an author who's worked through some of this himself. But I guess the bit that really strikes me in that is his realization that not every article I write will be as interesting to the public. And that feeds into a little bit of what I was saying earlier, that as the author here, the challenge is really to think about the hook within your research and to think about when we specifically trying to reach the general public and those groups of stakeholders, is it going to be interested to them? Does it have an impact on them? And can they relate to the research you've done? And then if you think the answer to those questions are yes, then that's absolutely where you would look at some of the tools and the tactics that would help you reach those groups. So on the slide here is a big list of promotional channels that authors have available. Not all of these will be available to every researcher, and not all of them will be relevant to every article, as I've just said, but hopefully a good number of them will be in each case. So I'll quickly rattle through some of these. Repositories are really, really good and a really good way of helping you reach academic stakeholders using an early version or a preprint of your article. You will almost certainly have a repository available within your subject area or within your institution as well. So worth investigating those as a way of making your article freely available. Conferences, teaching, workshops all provide really good ways of promoting your article, usually to academic stakeholders, as you'd imagine. Media and press releases, where you've got an article that has a clear hook that you think is of wider interest to society or is particularly newsworthy, then that's definitely a channel you should follow, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Videos, some authors will choose to record a short video abstract for their article. It's incredibly easy to do now. We all have smartphones and devices with cameras built into them. A short 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minute video explaining what your article is in sort of really simple language, what it's done, what it is and what its key findings are, can really help to grow engagement with your research, particularly on social media and other channels where people have a very short attention span and not loads of time to really digest the intricacies of your work. You can talk about your work on a personal blog or website or someone else's blog. We can also do social media promotion. I'll come back and talk about that in a minute. You can write a policy briefing, particularly important for the government stakeholders who you've identified a few slides ago. We'll talk about that a bit more as well. And you might choose to record a podcast. So there are lots of podcast series at the moment where academics feature research. You could join one of those or even start your own one if you're feeling especially brave. And then finally, email. This is probably the simplest thing to do, but actually one of the most impactful, of just sharing a link to your published research with the key researchers within your network. If your article's been published open access, it is as simple as just sharing a link and off you go. If it's been published in a subscription journal and sits behind a paywall, then actually most publishers, Taylor and Francis certainly do, will give you access to 50 free tokens, which you can share to researchers who can then access your article if they wouldn't already have access to it through their institutional collections. So that's a really good way as your article publishers of just making sure that lots of people can read it, and particularly the people within your network who are most important can read and have access to that article. But before we even get into any of that, there's one other channel that I didn't feature on that screen, but is actually really important, and that is SEO, or search engine optimization. And I call it the hidden channel because it's largely completely invisible, but actually has a major impact on the health of your article from the moment you publish. So it all begins with keywords. So as you finish off your article and as you submit your article, you will often be asked to provide some keywords to go with it. So what you may need to do is think about the relevant terms that someone would use to search for your article. And then what you want to do is then choose the terms that have the highest traffic to then put into your article title and article abstract. So in the article title, you obviously have very few characters, and actually you want your title to be as short as possible for a whole range of benefits. But Google Scholar, when it comes to index the article, will consider the length of the title and will give particular weight to keywords that are placed within the first 65 characters of your article title. So what you want to do then is make sure you have a really clear keyword or key phrase related to your topic early on in the title of your article. When you come to write your abstract, you've got obviously many more words to play with there, so it's a longer bulk of text. You can include then alternative keywords and phrases, synonyms in that section as well, and then you begin to build out a really good range of keywords attached to your article. Headings within your article, so search engines will use headings within an article to index the structure and the content of a paper. So again, you can use article keywords within headings wherever you can, and that will really help boost your article's SEO score. You want to create inbound links to your article once it's published, so the more places you promote it, the better. So links on web pages, blogs, social media, they will all help your article be indexed and boost your article's ranking within the search engines. And then finally, citations. Citations are a really important way that your article is ranked. So search engines will put more weight to articles that are cited heavily, as you'd imagine. And it can also boost both the new article being cited and the article doing the citing as well. That one comes with a health warning though, that it's really important that where you cite your previous publications, you only do that where it's relevant and where it's, as I say, completely relevant to the paper that you're publishing right now. You can actually do yourself a lot more damage if you unnecessarily cite your research where it's irrelevant. But all of those tips together, starting from just identifying the right keywords as you complete your research, will really help to boost your article's ranking within a search engine, and then ultimately make your article more discoverable as other researchers come looking for research in your subject area. Policy has been identified by you all as one of the groups that you might be trying to target. And as we've said, governments are increasingly asking researchers and universities to show the impact of their research, and then obviously getting research in front of policymakers becomes particularly important. Policymakers themselves really rely on new, reliable and accessible knowledge, so they will not often have the same depth of understanding in a subject area as you may, so actually they need the research broken down into short, simple policy briefs for them to take away and digest. So if you've produced a piece of research that you feel has a potential to really impact policy and is really important for governments, the first thing to really do is to create a policy brief. And what this is a short document, normally 1 or 2 sides of paper, outlining what the research paper is, your key findings, and the impact that can have on policy. It needs to be concise and it needs to be easily understandable, obviously. And it may also outline how the current policy is failing and break down simple practical steps as to what instead should be implemented. Once you've created that, you obviously then need to get that in front of the right people. And that's where you then need to identify who those policymakers are and get your research into Parliament. On the screen here, there are 2 graphics that we've created focused on both the European Parliament and the UK Parliament, working with a group called Sense About Science. There's lots of great advice on these graphics, which I won't go into in too much detail right now, although you can see there is a bit.ly link there to have a look at them if you wanted to. Although these are focused on the European Parliament and the UK Parliament, it's worth saying that actually a lot of the advice here is relevant to any parliament around the world, and certainly the governments and the organisations you would have in Australia and New Zealand and other areas. But really the focus here is on good networking, understanding who the people are, and then producing content, and in this case a policy brief that they can take away, digest quickly to help them understand what your research has found and how it can make a difference in terms of future policy. And in conferences, I've just got a few really brief notes here on conferences. I think a lot of you will know them well, although probably maybe not so much in recent times. I don't know how many conferences you'll have been able to go to. But when you come to present your paper at a conference, it's obviously a really effective way of reaching that academic group in particular. So what you need to think about is who are the people that you want to meet in advance and get those meetings arranged as early as possible before people's calendars book up. Look for sessions that are relevant to your research. Can you present your paper at the session? Are you early enough to join a panel and present your paper? Or if not, can you just ask a question within that session that again mentions your research and really shows people that you're a key person working in this area as well. Social media is so important around conferences. Before, during and after, there is always so much conversation attached to a conference hashtag or more widely. We'd really recommend you use social media, get involved and join that conversation as well. And then many researchers, whatever else you do, will also present your research in a poster session. So I'm sure many of you will know this, but this is an area normally set aside within the conference venue where you can put up a poster showing your research, and then there'll be time during the conference for people to visit those posters and hear more about the work you've done. So you want to prepare a 2 or 3 minute elevator pitch. You want your post to be relatively clear without too much text. Think about the design and make it as accessible as possible. And most importantly, you want to use that poster and that time you have within those poster sessions to really direct research to your article so they can go away and digest the full paper. Okay, so I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper now into press releases and media campaigns, and then we'll look at social media a little bit afterwards as well. So there's absolutely no doubt that using a press campaign to get a research article into the media can help boost the impact it achieves. It's a particularly useful tool if you want to reach readers beyond the research community and can really make a difference in taking your research to a global level and to help you reach a generalist audience as well. Media campaigns can lead to an increase in downloads, citations, and just the opportunity to reach audiences who might not otherwise have been exposed to your subject area. So this is particularly important then when we begin to think about those non-academic stakeholders before. So there's an infographic on the screen here showing one recent article that had a press campaign run by the Taylor and Francis press team. There were 45 news features that came from that work, although actually that's just a just a tip of the iceberg, because many journalists will not link back to the article when they publish their work, so we don't always know how many news mentions we have had. But actually that article was then downloaded more than 20,000 times, and it's provided a real media platform for the author who has consistently received requests to talk about his research and be interviewed about his research, even up to a year after the article has published. So you are soon to publish an article and you think that it might have a good hook to make it newsworthy, and potentially then you would like to promote your article to the press. There are a few things to think about. So firstly, is press the right channel? It's extremely time consuming to run a good press campaign. You need to obviously dedicate a lot of time to working with the press officer before it launches, and then potentially speaking to journalists once the press release goes out and being interviewed either for newspaper pieces, TV, radio, whatever it may be. It doesn't all have to be you. If you're the lead author, you can also bring in other authors from your project team, if there have been some, to work on that as well. But whatever you do, it does take a lot of time, and you need to make sure that then you've got the time to give to that. You need to have a really clear message, obviously. So journalists will receive hundreds of press releases a day, and your research then needs to stand head and shoulders above the noise. The rule of thumb here is that if you struggle to explain your article to someone outside of your discipline, it's probably likely that it's going to be too complex for a press campaign. And that's where that really clear message comes into play. And then finally, will you gain positive impact? So science is obviously not always easy to understand for a lay audience, and sometimes the miscommunication of research can be quite damaging and at worst obviously dangerous, and we'll all have seen examples of that in the past. So it's really important that your research needs to be communicated responsibly and clearly, and you need to really think about the implications of both positive and negative impact that might come from that. However, this sounds quite scary, but actually a good press officer will always be thinking about this and will actually do a lot of that work for you. And certainly within the Taylor and Francis press team, we would go through many checks before we launch a release to make sure that we're confident that we're communicating that research responsibly. All the stakeholders, including the author, are fully on board with what we've said and are in agreement with the summary of their research. And we're really thinking about all the different stakeholders that we're reaching and how the impact ultimately we gain will be positive. So with that note of caution taken into consideration, what sort of research tends to make the news? So there's four key areas really here. The first one is major discoveries. So obviously major discoveries here that are within a field of interest that people can relate to are always going to be popular with journalists and will often always be taken forward as press campaigns. Journalists will always look for the leap there and that people can relate to. So if a research is in a field that is especially niche, no matter how big a leap forward it seems, it might always struggle to cut through to the broader public. So that's really something to think about. Major discoveries in relatively accessible fields are always going to be attractive for press campaigns. You need to think about how the research affects everyday life. So what impact does that have on society? Journalists will always try and put people at the centre of the story. So that will make it far more relatable for a wider audience if your research can be attributable for that area. Does it make a recommendation for a change in practice? It's particularly rewarding, I think, as a message to communicate to the press how something is not working at the moment and how it can be done differently. So again, that's really something to think about, and particularly if your research is highlighting a need for a change in practice or policy, that can be a really effective tool for accelerating that process. And finally, is it timely? Ideally, you want your research to add something of value to the current media narrative. So coronavirus at the moment is the obvious example of this, where we're launching a lot of press releases at the moment that are linked to coronavirus, and those tend to be very impactful because obviously that is the centre of the narrative. We also have COP26 at the moment, so there's a lot of environmental research being promoted, and again, now would be a good time for a campaign around that if your research is within that area. So you can really see how playing into the current media narrative can really help you launch your research to the press and make impact at exactly the right moment. Things to avoid: published research. If your research has already been published, it's a real disadvantage for press campaigns. Journalists usually will always cover breaking news. So if an article has already published, it does vastly reduce its chances of making the cut. We will always launch our campaigns before, or launch our press campaigns before the research has published, and then launch it under embargo. So you really need to speak to your press officer or the Taylor and Francis team well before your research publishes to get it taken forward for a press campaign. If a research holds wider interest but doesn't really offer anything novel for journalists to cover, it can obviously make it more challenging to pitch it to the media. And we've talked about niche areas of research before as well, being particularly difficult to promote on a global campaign. If it's within a relatively niche in terms of the geographical reach, then that's less of a problem, because actually there's always different agencies within countries who will be able to support press campaigns. So for instance, the Australian Science Media Centre would be able to work on press campaigns for research that's very much focused on Australia and the ANZ region, but potentially has less impact and less interest outside of that. And there are other similar groups in North America, Europe, Asia, who will all work on media campaigns and promotions specific for the areas that you may or may not be working in. Sample size is really important, and many journalists will question this. So larger scale or longer term studies with a really strong evidence base are going to be far more likely to grab a journalist's attention than something which is quite small scale and quite niche. And then finally, having no one available to talk is going to be a big issue for journalists, and we've talked about that already. Journalists will always normally want to speak to an author before they launch a campaign, and that's really what that embargo period is for. So if you'd like to find out more about promoting your research, and there's a whole wealth of different resources which can be found online. So we've got our author services site here, which has lots of information on that. And then there's also media centres, and I've just listed the Science Media Centre in Australia as one really good place who can provide lots of good advice on media communication. I think they have some really good video guides as well. Many institutions will also have a press office who are happy to help support authors as well. So that's another path to check out. If you are publishing with Taylor and Francis though, and you'd like us to talk about a press campaign, then the first step is to fill out our press nomination form, which you can find on our author services site. It's a very short form to fill out, which basically just asks a bit of information about yourself as an author and the study that you've done. And then they will take it from there and work with you on a campaign to launch that out if they feel there's value in doing so. If you want to speak to a team before you do that, if you have any questions at all, then our email address is newsroom@taylorandfrancis.com. Please do reach out to them. Okay, just a little bit on social media. A question we often get asked is, why is there value in sharing your research on social media? And this quote from the founder of All Metric sort of hopefully answers that a little bit. And that is really that people are going to tweet, they're going to talk about your article no matter what you do. So actually social media gives you a real opportunity to engage with those interested audiences and actually put your side of the story and really represent your research in the best possible way. Many people will know with social media there is value and there is also risks. We would argue that there's a lot more value, and actually ultimately the interaction you gain and the way you promote your research will be positive, but obviously you do need to be aware of the risks and the challenge of using social media. So obviously the main areas of value are that your audience is already there, particularly in some spaces. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook tend to have really big academic groups within them, and almost certainly your subject area is represented in some way. It provides an opportunity to promote your research in real time, so instant promotion. You get a huge wealth of useful data through social in terms of how people are reading and engaging with your research. And also it gives you the opportunity to test different things and learn quickly. So actually improve your promotional approaches if you feel things aren't working. The difficulties are that tracking return on investment can be difficult, and linked to that is very time intensive. It takes a lot of time to do this well, and to really build out sort of strategies and approaches for each of the different social platforms. Many people are scared of trolling, and the feeling that you might make a mess of things. You might say something that you don't mean, or your words might be misconstrued. And obviously, once it's out there, it's hard to bring it back. And obviously, you don't really own it. So anything you put into a social media platform belongs to the social media platform. As an author, then you can feel like a slight loss of control with that. So how can you make sure that you are successful? And the first thing is to really know your audience. Think about who are the groups you want to reach. Think about what you want to achieve overall. So what are your objectives? And then choose your social platform based on those 2 points above. So as I say, you've got Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. They're probably the 3 main platforms where audiences will be. Also ResearchGate as well was more of a researcher focused platform. Once you've really thought about the audiences you're trying to reach and the groups they may be, you then will choose your platform accordingly. So if you want to try and reach and engage the general public through social media, you're going to probably go in a slightly different place to if you wanted to reach an academic audience that are already curated and maybe existing within your subject area. Whoever you're trying to reach, though, you need to create obviously compelling posts. So what will resonate, think about what will resonate with the audience, think about the language you need to use. For a non-academic group, it's clearly going to have to be a shorter and simpler summary of your article, maybe than for an academic audience. And also build community. So social media should actually be social. It shouldn't just be you pushing content out there. You're trying to take back and listen to and feed into the discussions as well, and hear the advice from others. Key points to remember, you don't need to be everywhere doing everything. This is a really common mistake I think people make, is that they think they have to launch everything across social media, when actually focusing maybe on 1 or 2 channels and doing that really well is likely to have better results for your article than a broader approach that targets everything. Social media allows you to share a really valuable expert voice. With so much misinformation out there, that's really important. No one has more credibility to talk about your article than you do. So actually taking that voice and really presenting yourself as the expert is going to really help your article be presented and promoted in the most effective way possible. And finally, don't try to communicate your research in too much detail. Use social media as an olive branch to lead people on to more detailed findings and discussion elsewhere. So actually use social media for short, snappy promotion, share graphics, share bits of video if you've created it, and then use that as a link to hopefully then get them through to read your article in full somewhere where they're going to have more time to do so. And again, just a couple of useful resources. So on our Author Services site, working with the Science Media Centre, we've actually created this guide, which is advice for researchers experiencing harassment and trolling on social media. And that provides information for what to do if you're in the moment and that's happening, or preemptive information to help you hopefully avoid situations like that occurring in the first place. And also there's another post as well around skills for the future, covering social media and other great tips as well. So lots of information out there if you'd like to consider social media a bit more. Okay, and then finally, for the presentation today, we're just going to have a look at some of the other resources and training that are available for authors. But before we go into those in too much detail, and actually I just need to move Minty on a bit here, sorry. Just going to move that on the screen. Okay, sorry. I'd like us to think about the groups that, so I'm just getting everything set up here. I'd like us to think about the barriers to public engagement and the reasons that researchers feel unequipped to participate in public engagement. So Wellcome back in 2018 did another survey, this time asking researchers why they felt unequipped, sorry 2016 not 2018, asking researchers why they felt unequipped to participate in public engagement. And as a result of that survey, we got lots and lots of answers from researchers, and I'd like you to have a go at identifying which ones the key ones were. So if you go back into Menti, the same code as before, it will ask you that question, and you can answer as many times as you like again. This time it will show all the answers separately, not as a word cloud. And I'm seeing a few of them starting to come in now. And then what we'll do is we'll have a look at those and we'll see how these relate to the answers that were actually given in the survey using the Wellcome data in a minute. So you should be able to still see my screen, and you should be able to then see those answers coming through. So we can see lack of time is, I think, there about on 3 different occasions. So I need some reason here it's not letting me scroll, which is going to be a little bit of a problem, but I'm just going to see if I can, okay, that's it, I can fix it like that. Okay, so we can see lack of time is a problem. Lack of confidence is raised here, imposter syndrome. COVID-19 fundamentally at the moment is a massive issue with engaging with the general public, as you rightly identify there. Lack of standing in the field, fear of being questioned is a major one. Not sure how. Hopefully we've started to address that today, although I appreciate there's a lot there. No formal training, not sure about the impact achieved. Will it be worthwhile? I guess also positive and negative impacts we talked about. Fear of trolling, time, introverted, lack of preparation, fear of criticism. Academic processes are prohibitive. When you finish one piece of work, you already need to work on the next. We hear that one a lot, so that's a really, really common issue and challenge that people raise. Fear of failure, fear of negative washback. Not sure anyone would care. Yeah, so loads and loads of good points here. I think clustering around a number of different themes. Yeah, can't translate into layperson's terms. We hear about that one a fair bit as well. So actually my research is really technical, really specific. I just don't think it is understandable, and it's really hard to translate that without watering it down so much that it becomes meaningless. English as a second language, research confidential government. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a really specific issue, which is gonna hold you back. But on the whole there, you can see that I suppose really the real, the number one factor is definitely time. There's also points around confidence and just not understanding how as well. So I'm just going to come out of here and go back into the presentation itself, if it will let me. Okay. So these were the actual answers given in the study. So lack of training and lack of experience were the two major reasons that researchers gave. Lack of time and lack of confidence also came up high. Don't have necessary skills and don't know how to get involved. And you can see that almost word for word, those are exactly the key themes that you have picked up on as well. That's worth saying that as you know, stakeholders here who can support you, there are some things we can help with, training, and obviously giving you hopefully the skills and a bit of experience in doing some of this stuff. But there are other things, time being the main one, that obviously we can't solve. But it's worth saying that we've talked through a lot of channels today, and the time needed is very different in some channels than others. There are things you can do that are very, very quick that can have real impact and really help you promote your work that aren't time intensive. And as I talked about, things like, you know, simple email campaigns, even recording short snippets of video to promote your research. You can do that within a matter of minutes, and actually that can really help you to grow the reach of your research. In terms of the places where you can go for more resources and training, so I've mentioned a few times our Author Services website. I'm obviously quite biased on this one, but it really is a great place to start your journey, if you like, when you're looking to find out more in this area. There's a whole section of a website dedicated to post-publication support, so that's really a good place to go to find more information. Institutions will often offer support as well through their own research offices. So this screenshot is taken from the University of Melbourne website, but many institutions will offer separately around making sure that your research has impact. There are YouTube tutorials and channels. So this is an example of a PhD diaries, which is one channel following a researcher as she navigates the world of publishing. There are lots of similar channels as well. Funders are typically offering more support in this area, so Wellcome have actually now set up a course that researchers can complete to go away and basically train them in public engagement. Podcasts and webinars can offer support. So again, this is a Taylor and Francis webinar called, Taylor and Francis podcast series called How Researchers Change the World. It features key publications and the real world impact of that research, speaking directly to authors who have published that research. As well as that podcast, though, there are also 2 online learning programs, and I'll talk about those a little bit in a minute. And then finally, there might be community blogs and forums. So I used to work on the biomechanics journals at Taylor and Francis, and this is always a forum that was set up by researchers in that subject area to talk about the research they're doing. You will no doubt be aware of other similar forums that exist within your own subject area, but again, a really good place to discuss and talk about your research. I mentioned the How Research Changed the World learning programs. I just wanted to give these a quick shout out to you all, because these are two programs, one tailored towards early career researchers and one tailored towards mid-career researchers, that offer you training and support to grow your research profile and ensure that the research you publish has impact. These programs are delivered completely for free and online as a 12-week course. You can sign up using the bit.ly link on the web on the screen there, so bit.ly/2MSVQJ7. The learning programs, as I say, run for a 12-week course. It's delivered into your inbox once a week. There's nothing to join. There's no sort of formal session or anything like that, but they're really, really useful. And if you're interested in finding out more in this area and you see yourself as either an early career or a mid-career researcher, then it's well worth looking at these as a way to find out more about the training and the tools that you can undertake to grow your profile. And then finally, our Auth Services website. I've talked about this lots already, but there's a link on the screen there. And obviously, as I said, you can see there the bottom section, section 8 of the site, is all around promoting your research. And you'll find lots and lots more tips and tricks around all of the channels we've talked about today. There's also lots of other information on the site from the earlier stages of the publication process around choosing a journal, drafting your article, getting it through peer review, all of the information you might need around that. And that then brings me to the end of the presentation today. So thank you for listening and for sticking with me this morning, or this afternoon is for you. I hope this information has been really useful to you. And I'm now going to throw it open if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Luke. I think with that, I think please join me in thanking Luke for joining in so early from the UK. I'm sure our audience got a lot of useful insights from you. To wrap up, please allow me to reiterate to keep an eye on our social media platforms to get notified of such informative webinars in the future. There is one coming on 23rd of November, again with Taylor and Francis on understanding open science. So of course, please keep an eye on them. With that, I think we'll call it a day for today, and signing off for today and wishing you a good week ahead. Thank you very much from myself and Luke, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. It's lovely to speak to you all.